Senator, thank you so much for joining CNBC. I want to kick off just by asking you, there's been a report that essentially the Ukrainians have suggested they'll allow the United States to have eyes on any target that they plan in terms of the Russian military in exchange for more weapons, a special weapons system. We're talking about surface-to-air missiles. Is that a possibility in your mind?
I think we need to be very clear with the Russians about what we're going to do, what we're not going to do. So far, we've made clear we're not putting American boots on the ground, and we're going to be very careful about giving weapons to the Ukrainians that can be used to launch attacks into Russia. I think that serves us well. I think we should always be open to innovative offers from the Ukrainians. Obviously, they are making progress, momentum on the battle space, and so we shouldn't be stingy at this moment, given what's happening on the ground. But it's also important for us to have real clear lines that we're willing to cross and not willing to cross. That's important to make sure that this doesn't escalate into a war between the United States and Russia.
Are you encouraged by the things that you've heard today at the forum?
Well, I think there's transatlantic unity. The Poles are obviously heroic in their efforts to take in so many refugees. The United States is, here to support in any way that we can. And I hope they feel encouraged by what the United States Congress is doing. We're here right on the heels of a new $12 billion commitment from Congress to Ukraine. I don't think that's the end of our support. And so my hope is that the good news we're bringing to this conference from the Congress is going to stimulate the Europeans to step up and do even more.
No conflict in the 21st century obviously has highlighted how energy equates national security, as this one has. Are you worried that we're going to see a fracture in the alliance as a result of energy poverty now entering the mainstream across this continent?
Yeah, listen, what a mistake for Europe to have been welded to Russia when it comes to energy. And we're now seeing the price of that mistake. So let's make up for lost time. In the United States, we just passed a historic commitment to renewable energy so that we are no longer dependent on, frankly, the Russians nor the Saudis or any other dictator in the world. And this is a moment for Europe to spend some money. I know that's hard to do when you're right now dealing with such economic pressures, but this is the moment to spend money on nuclear energy, on renewable energy, on connecting to non-Russian pipelines. I'm hopeful that the Americans will put some money up to help Europe, especially.
They're worried about price gouging, as you know.
Yeah, no, I know, but this is a moment to make some investments that'll pay off in the long run.
Walk me through how you see energy dynamic today, because I'll be in Vienna tomorrow meeting with OPEC Plus. They're anticipating a cut potentially of as much as basically 1 million barrels a day. And there are a lot of worries, frankly, about what that could do to energy prices in this part of the world. Do you think that's a mistake on their part?
I think it is a mistake on their part. And I think it's time for a wholesale reevaluation of the U.S. alliance with Saudi Arabia. What's the point of looking the other way as the Saudis chop up journalists and repress political speech inside Saudi Arabia if, when the chips are down, the Saudis effectively choose the Russians instead of the United States? We've been very clear with them. We need them right now, right? We need them to take some steps that, may affect their short-term bottom line when it comes to oil revenues, but allow the Western alliance to survive this challenge from Russia. And it seems that, either the Saudis aren't willing to stand with us or have to be pushed really hard to stand with us. And I just don't know what the point of the current alliance is if we have to work so hard to get the Saudis to do the right thing.
So President Biden's visit to Saudi Arabia was a mistake in your mind, or just a failure? Because it clearly hasn't elicited anything that the administration was hoping.
I think the president's visit does not seem to have gotten us from the Saudis what we need. There's also news of the truce in Yemen falling apart this week. I think you got to be very careful to do business with the Saudis these days. You're condoning and associating yourself with a brutal regime, and a regime, frankly, that doesn't seem to be willing to stand with its allies in Europe and the United States when we really need them.
When you think about what happens next, obviously there's a plus in OPEC Plus, and that plus, of course, is Russia. Is that, to your mind, another on the list of litany mistakes that this so-called cartel has made?
I mean, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, others could make tons of money even without Russia as part of this cartel. I know it enhances their profits to be able to coordinate with Russia, but it is not necessary. They could have taken a stand on behalf of their allies, like the United States and those in Europe, but they chose not to. Listen, the path forward is through China and India. I mean, right now, China and India hold the cards with Russia. They're obviously making a lot of money off of buying oil at deep discounts. But if they choose to take a different tact and say to the Russians that their willingness to continue to be the purchaser of all this oil that can't find a home in the European or U.S. market is dependent on Russia's behavior changing in Ukraine, things can start to happen.
It's interesting because, as you mentioned, China, I mean, half of their crude comes from the Gulf Arab states, and I'm talking about Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, and others. So isn't there a conduit there for the United States to put pressure on Beijing in terms of their decision-making?
There should be, but I think we've seen ample evidence that the Gulf states are, operating based on their own best economic interests, not on the security interests of the United States and Europe.
They could make the same charge to us, to the United States, no?
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, we're looking out for...
Because we're not doing too bad out of this in terms of the energy crisis, right, as you've said.
Well, listen, we obviously have significant energy resources in the United States, but, this energy crunch is hitting the United States as well. Listen, I wish that we were more deeply integrated when it comes to security policy with our Gulf partners. This is a moment that's exposed the fact that the Gulf states are going to choose profits, and that we shouldn't be so surprised that they're not aligned with us when it comes to the defense of democracy. They're not democracies. They aren't as interested in the same set of values as the United States are. So at a moment when democracy is under attack, it's probably not shocking that the Gulf states are choosing profits instead.
Walk me through this one. U.S. President Joe Biden overnight declaring that he is going to run in 2024. Will you support him?
Well, I have not seen that report.
Apparently he told Al Sharpton.
But I have been hoping that the president would run again. I have been publicly supportive of him running again. I think this is a president who is on an incredible winning streak. I mean, I've never seen a string of legislative accomplishments as we've seen this year, defeating the gun lobby, the fossil fuel industry, the drug lobbies. Approval ratings are rising. So I have always been hopeful that the president is going to run again. And of course, I will support him enthusiastically if he does so.
There have been a lot of conversations over the last several months about President Putin's mental state. And when I met with him last October, it seemed as if he knew exactly what he was doing, at least in regards to the energy market. I was told by one very prominent CEO of an energy company here in Europe that this was a man, Vladimir Putin, who knew the energy markets down to the last molecule. And he told me in hindsight, it was pretty clear what he was going to do. If you take a look at what's happening today, what is your greatest fear there? That we're going to see the nuclear threat become a real one?
I think you have to take seriously these thinly veiled threats that Putin is making. He's likely trying to test us. I don't think that we should allow these threats to back us down right now. We need to make clear to him that there will be a significant cost and a significant change in U.S. policy if he were to ever use tactical nuclear weapons. But, what I see is a Russian president who's in desperate straits, who's had incredible backlash in the wake of this mobilization, who's seeing losses on the battlefield, who's got political instability at his feet. He's got friends like China and India starting to doubt whether they're in this with him for the long haul. And so, yes, he may be acting out in erratic ways, but this is a moment for us to realize that we're winning. Our friends in Ukraine are winning, and that probably comes with some dangerous and provocative rhetoric from the Russian regime.
Senator, thank you for joining CNBC.
Thank you.